Okay, so my name is Deborah Boisvert, and I'm the director of the Baytech Center for IT and Computing in Boston, and I have several of my colleagues here. And Chuck is actually from Indiana, Purdue Calumet, and Paula is from Bunker Hill Community College in Boston, Massachusetts, and they were part of this grant that we're talking about here. This was part of a CPATH grant, which was Computing Pathways. It was funded out of the National Science Foundation. About 4 years ago, we actually finished it this past summer and have created a transfer manual, which is available freely for download online. So one of the things that happened with the IT, and this was a community building project. So the idea was to be able to create a culture of transfer working with 3 different states to be able to really think about how to better transfer IT students. And so one of the things that allowed us, that really was the context for all of this, was that IT employment really has had a lot of different changes that have happened. There are skill sets that are appropriate for these students, and that the requirements do change, and they have changed over the last few years. There was a new, these IT has been a enabler for all of these things, but there is also some kind of thinking around what IT stands for as far as the type of accreditation pieces. So the Association for Computing Machinery had come out with a 4-year model curriculum, and that there were integrative components of programming and networking and web and information management, human-computer interaction. These were types of things that, if you had heard the speaker this morning, constitutes the kind of the breadth of the T. And so the idea was that this was built so that they would have a really broad-based understanding of capabilities and then be able to concentrate as they went forward. So the partners, as I said, were Massachusetts, Virginia, Indiana. We paired a university partner with a community college partner. So in Massachusetts, it was UMass Boston and Bunker Hill Community College, and actually Roxbury also participated for a while. In Virginia, it was George Mason University and Northern Virginia Community College, and in Indiana, it was Purdue University, Calumet, and Ivy Tech Community College. What we were trying to do in here was to try to create a community of practitioners that could really think about this very broadly. What was very interesting is to look at various transfer models. Each of these states had very different types of things going on. Indiana, actually, during the course of the grant, ended up getting a state mandate that forced 2 to 4 year transfers. Virginia actually kind of had almost a understanding that this would happen, and Massachusetts kind of created a total mess. So, we were actually trying to think through what really helped in transfer and really tried to identify what types of promising practices would happen, et cetera. So what we did was we tried different things out in various areas, and then we tried to create this body of knowledge, which, as I said, we've created a guide to go forward. In the context of this, we took and had educator summits where we brought together 2 and 4 year faculty and administrators. We went through a lot of questions and scenarios with them, and so you'll see those in just a few minutes, the types of questions that we asked. In fact, that's what we would like you to kind of brainstorm a little bit with us to kind of model what we did. And then the groups came together after they did this within their state. We compared notes, and then we tried to analyze what we thought worked and didn't work. So, questions asked. Here's how we started. We actually brought 2 to 4 year schools together, and we said, okay, what are some of the constraints on the transfer process? So we said, okay, so community colleges, what are the constraints? So, where are you from? Okay.
Yeah, I can see where some CT, but classes aren't transferable.
Okay, so you're at the high school level?
No, I'm at
okay.
community college, but I'm in a specific program.
Okay.
And it didn't necessarily, records management and logistics make, they transferable course, core course, curriculum course.
Okay.
4 years.
Okay. Okay, and now, four-year institutions. What are some of the constraints with four-year institutions, besides the fact that they don't understand what you're doing, right? And they may not have exactly what you want.
That's matching course content. Because course by course, trying to be able to identify equals.
So if your courses don't match up. So, one of the things that really happens in transfer is that oftentimes it is often the four-year institution that tells the community college, if you want your program to transfer, you will do exactly what we do and nothing else. In fact, we had that situation in Massachusetts with UMass Dartmouth and Bristol Community College. So anytime a professor at UMass Dartmouth decided that they wanted to do a different type of something within their class, Bristol went and they learned exactly how to do it, and they did and mirrored every single thing that Dartmouth did. And so it was completely a mirrored process. Now, what happens with that is that, first of all, Dartmouth may not be the authority on some of this. They may not know, but Bristol is going to do exactly what they wanted them to do in order to make that happen. We actually took a little bit different stance, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we talked about the next thing we did, and then other constraints. What about accreditation? I mean, that's one of the biggest excuses from four-year institutions. Well, for accreditation, we can't change anything to help you because then we won't be able to get accredited. Now, on the regulatory side, you have things where, our state requires certain things, and so this doesn't quite work. But on the other hand, it could be regulatory on the other end as far as enablers. So, and then we said, okay, so let's start listing all of the enablers. And so we had them with posters around the room. Said, okay, let's start listing enablers. So, enablers such as faculty. How are faculty enablers?
Enablers of changing the process?
Of transfer, yes. So how do faculty enable the transfer process?
Putting through the appropriate information so they know what they need.
Okay. So they can be kind of advisors, or they can actually go and match the outcomes of the others or whatever. Okay. What about administration? How do they enable the process?
Make sure that the curriculum that's being taught is aligned with university.
Or they can create a culture, that encourages this type of cooperation, etc. And then regulatory, like Indiana, they can basically say, you're going to do it, and you're going to figure it out no matter what. You're going to sit in a room and figure it out. Do you want to talk a little bit about what happened when that happened?
Well, there was a lot of reluctance on the faculty's part in our departments because they felt that the rigor wasn't there from the community college, and that the students received the materials, the knowledge from the classroom at the community college that was not nearly up to par with what it would be at our place. And not that we're better than they are, but that when they came into our program, because our faculty felt that the rigor of the courses at community college were not up to speed or par with what we were teaching, but when they came in to take the subsequent follow-up courses at our campus, they wouldn't do well and they'd fail, and it would reflect negatively on them as faculty as opposed to really the fact that the students were properly prepared. So we did work with some of the faculty at the community college, mostly the dean at that point, And they didn't change much. In fact, I went back to the faculty after a while, and I said, you know, they're ABET accredited. How bad can it be? There's got to be a standard that they have to meet in order to be that. So there was reluctance on the faculty side to accept it. And ultimately, we transferred in the courses. We didn't match course by course, but it was really the whole 2-year program. And there were a couple instances where a couple courses on the community college side didn't fit in with what we did. Or we had 2 courses in particular that they didn't offer. So that we transferred in everything, but they didn't accept the 5. They didn't have 2 courses. They had to take our campus instead. But it worked out, and it worked out as Deborah indicated because it wasn't a choice. You know, it had to happen, and we are attracting the students from Ivy Tech in this case, and there are some that fail and some that do well. I don't know if the statistics, I haven't looked at them to see if there's any significant difference between the transfer students from other institutions versus this campus and from Ivy Tech. But that's something we should look into.
So I know, Paula, you're having some problem with your voice, but can you talk a little bit about what happened in Massachusetts when we tried to do just a little bit of what we tried to do in order to facilitate transfer? Nope. Okay. So basically, I'll reiterate it a little bit, is what we tried to do was start looking at outcomes. And so one of the things that we tried to think about is, can outcomes be a means of being able to help facilitate this transfer? So, and then what we also did was we worked with each of the institutions. As I said, we were in 3 different states, and we looked at what types of steps it took. And it was very interesting when we actually started analyzing at UMass Boston the steps for transfer. It actually was this something like 15-step process that often took, you know, a couple of months, and it was just unbelievably encumbering. And it was something that we tried to figure out, well, do other states have different ideas that can maybe lean some of this? We looked at the research to say, okay, what are some of the best practices? And then we started looking at, well, what were some of the common denominators of successful types of transfer pieces? And then we got into some kind of a question on how do we define success? So one of the things that, does it mean that every student gets to transfer and that every course is transfer? What actually constitutes success in transfer? And what we really felt that was constituted success in transfer was students being able to be successful as they went up to that next level. Not just that they got in there, but they could successfully transition. So one of the things that we did in Massachusetts, and Paula was very instrumental in trying to help work through this, is that faculty sat down and looked at what was expected at the 4-year level of a junior. So tell us what you want that junior to know and be able to do. And so what then happened is they looked at how they could chart that backwards. It was not exactly the way that UMass Boston did it. It did not match course by course. But because they got to the same outcome level, we figured out how to manipulate that in a way that kind of looks like course to course if you kind of go to the piece of paper, but it really isn't. And it really matched things that may not necessarily have matched otherwise, but we knew that because, you know, there was this piece of something in this course, so because one of the conversations we had at UMass Boston, because I was there with a lot of the people saying, well, this course isn't exactly the same as this. I said, okay, so if you said this was a check minus, well, this course actually has that extra component in it, so you're going to give that one a check plus so that it kind of balances out. And well, we can't really do it. Yeah, we can. So that's how we finally did it. We actually made sure that the types of outcomes were consistent. And the thing that's really nice is that when these students started transferring over, they were extremely successful. The first student who transferred over to UMass Boston after this went into effect, the second year that he was there, won the computer science award for the best student at UMass Boston. And the same thing at UMass Amherst, they're transferring over there, and in fact, a lot of the faculty say that if they find out that it's a Bunker Hill student, they hire them immediately because it's the best students and they work harder than anybody else. So, so that's how we really started looking at how we should think very differently about this process. And we took these two questions and said, what would we do if we could? And that was, okay, let's figure out how to make this happen. Let's try to think through what it would take. And so that's how we started looking at what barriers needed to be moved, etc. So taking these questions and having people actually sit down and work through these things were very valuable for the success of the project. So here were the findings that we basically came up with, and as I said, this is all in a transfer guide, and I'll show you how to get there in just a second. But that basically, you know, we found that if everything matches perfectly, that's when it works the best and the most seamless, but it's also not something that is easily maintainable. And you know, it's one of those, and it's not always in the best interest of the student. So the fact that we had this common body of knowledge from CSITES also was extremely important, because it allowed us to be able to have conversations between the 2- and 4-year institutions and really talk about the outcomes that were needed. And as I said, this was comparing outcomes and course expectations, really helped pave the way for these students. And it was faculty to faculty that had to do it. It was not the transfer office of one institution talking to the transfer office of the other institution. It was really sitting down faculty to faculty and saying, okay, what does this look like? What are you expecting? You know, if you've got, and it's not an easy process, as I'm sure everyone can attest to. I mean, it really is a lot of conversations about what really is expected. And it does take a village to make this happen. Everybody has to work together, has to be supportive of each other. Administration needs to understand what it takes to be able to get this success, to be able to be successful. You have to have the admissions and registrars and everybody else at the table to make it happen. There are certain technology tools that are appropriate to be able to allow these things to be able to be done more seamlessly. The more that you can introduce those and have them be an enabler versus a constraint, because oftentimes technology tools does like a degree audit, and if that course doesn't exactly do that course, it throws it out. But, you know, if you can figure out how to do it, and, you know, technology allows you to actually have better capabilities, but a lot of times they don't know how to do that effectively. So, you know, and the one thing that we have struggled with in all of the states is that as high school students, they are taking dual enrollment classes. The problem comes in sometimes, or they'll take something that articulates from the high school into the community college. The problem is if that is not listed as a course at the community college, oftentimes that won't transfer into a 4-year institution because it wasn't actually part of their program of study and taken that way. So if it's just articulated into the community college, all of a sudden they may not get credit for that. And that one we have not figured out yet, as far as, you know, unless it is actually listed as a course itself. So, let me see. Is this online? Can I get online quickly?
Sure.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Huh? I know. It's okay. Yeah. Okay, so if you go to baytech.org, and actually it's been changed a little bit because it's really quirky a little bit now, but it'll get you to where you need to be. Okay, so if you come down on the left-hand side here, there's one that says CPATH. Okay, and this is the project right here. That's actually a different project, excuse me. If you come down here, you see here a transfer guide. So the whole transfer guide is online. It is downloadable, freely downloadable. It is a PDF. It also has some different documents. It has, for example, the agenda for the meetings that we had the questions that we went over earlier. It has some different other types of things where, so it really talks about different things that work and don't work, etc. So we'd love for you to read it. We'd love for you to give us feedback.
Did you, so you got funding for this, did that pay for the people to do this work, or what did the funding pay for? Did you incentivize the faculty to do this work to do it, or did they do it on their own time?
A combination. So the project team themselves, so there was a faculty person from each of the institutions that was paid as part of the grant to be able to work through it. There was money for some of these different summit meetings. Where it was appropriate to do a few stipends, yes, those were done. And it paid for also a large meeting at the end to finalize this document where everybody came together, all of the stakeholders, admissions departments from each of the schools as well as the team to come together and talk together and make sure that we had this right.
It also did for having meetings locally with the community college and all the officers from both the community college and the four-year institution meeting together.
You paid people for their time.
We didn't pay them for the time, but we purchased food and we allowed them to have a day to work with us.
So that was the type of thing. But there were, as I said, stipends to each of the lead people. So there was a faculty person from Ivy Tech and one from Purdue Calumet, for example, that were stipended to do it.
How long did it take from day one to beautiful document?
It was a 3-year grant. And a lot of it was really doing the research behind it. The document itself was pretty much a year or so. And as I said, we'd love to get your feedback.